So this presentation is all about portraiture, and it's probably one of the most popular units that we teach here at the high school. Everyone likes to be able to take a photograph of their friends, their family, and to have it look really great. So in this unit, we're going to learn how to go beyond selfies. You know what a selfie is, when you kind of like hold your phone and you do a quick little shot. Sometimes you have your mouth open or you stick your tongue out. This is going to go beyond that and to really get at kind of what is a good portrait all about. So strong portraits get at who the person is on the inside, not just what they look like on the outside. They evoke a mood or a feeling. They use strong compositional techniques. They use lighting techniques and they capture the personality of the subject, whether that is their true personality or whether that is the perceived personality that the photographer wants to portray. And sometimes the photographer will ask their model to act a certain way, to look a certain way, so that they can manipulate how and what we see when we look at the photograph. So understanding lighting is really important for capturing a good portrait. In our first unit, we started to learn about lighting and how to adjust the lighting. And in this unit, we're going to explore a little bit more, especially with artificial lighting. We'll be learning about studio lighting and natural light sources as well. Remember that you do have two types of light sources, natural and artificial. Natural includes sunlight, moonlight. It can also include candlelight or light coming in from a window. Artificial light sources would be like using a flash, using a studio light, or the light that's turned on in a room. So natural, like I said, is sometimes referred to as available light, meaning you're in a room, there's no lights on, but there is a light source. That light is coming in from the window. So we call that available light. It's the light that's available to us to light the scene. Sometimes artificial light can be available light. I'm thinking, for example, when you are sitting in a darker room and the only light might be your cell phone light or your computer light, it serves almost as an available light source. Other natural light that you can get is outside light, and there are different kinds of outdoor settings we shoot photos in. Believe it or not, cloudy days are the best for doing portraiture because there are no harsh shadows. Everything looks kind of soft and natural, and it's a nice diffused type of lighting. Moonlight can be really interesting too. It creates kind of an alternative feeling to the source and can be really cool. So artificial light, using a flash for portraiture can be a bit harsh, but if that's what you're going for, that can be kind of cool. We can also work with something called bounce or fill lighting, which what that means is I'll be showing you how to do this, but using a white umbrella or a white sheet, you can shine your light source onto that umbrella and it can sort of reflect the white light back up into the face of the subject. And it's a way to fill the subject with lighting that helps give us a softer kind of light. There's also dramatic artificial lighting, which is when you have just one studio light and everything else is really dark. And the goal of that is to make it look really dramatic. So composition reminders, we already learned these, but I just want to remind you that they still apply with portrait and in fact can be the ticket to making a really strong photograph. So fill that frame, framing, leading lines, level horizon, making sure your camera is in focus, the rule of thirds, balance, thinking about asymmetry versus symmetry, having something touch all the sides of the frame, and allowing your subject to go off the page on purpose. These are all things you can do to have a better quality photograph in terms of composition. So we're going to just look at some examples of portraiture for a few moments here. And I'd like you to reflect on them in terms of, compositionally what's going on. Who is the person? Is it a good portrait? What kind of lighting is it lit with? So this first one is by Harry Callahan, and it's a portrait of his wife. So just take a moment to look at this. So some of us might feel like this isn't a good portrait because, first of all, her eyes are closed. So it's hard for us to engage with her, to learn more about her, who she is, because her eyes are closed. But I think this is a really interesting photograph. It has a kind of a calm feeling to it, a bit serene. You might also say that it's maybe a little bit mysterious. I like the way that the hair kind of is moving with the flow of the waves. There's good black and white contrast. It's most likely lit with natural light, and this little bit of reflection here helps tell the story. So kind of an interesting, mysterious photograph. This is a portrait of Imogene Cunningham. It's actually a self-portrait. She was a photographer back in the 1920s through about 1980s. She lived a long life, and she was a female photographer during a time when there were very few women making a career as photographers. So when we look at this self-portrait from a composition point of view, hopefully you notice that we have asymmetrical balance. That's that capital L shape you see here. Also the rule of thirds, where something important intersects the vertical thirds and the horizontal thirds of the picture plane. Notice how she repeats the circle shape. Her eyeglasses are a circle, the lens of the camera is a circle, and it's sort of a circular movement of the lighting as well. It was important for Imogene to show that she was a serious photographer, so her face is somewhat serious. This is a camera back here. I know it doesn't look like what you think of when you think of a camera, but this is a really big, what's called a view camera. And so this is the lens of that camera. So it's kind of interesting because you can see a reflection of whoever she's shooting a photo of in the lens. So she's giving you a look into her world. Notice how important her eyes are. You know, a photographer needs good eyesight. So she's giving you that information about her. This is just a photo I found on the internet, but I thought it was a nice example of a portrait that's definitely been posed. And the more we look at it, the more we start to notice about the people in the portrait. So take a minute to observe. So you see two people in this portrait, but the portrait is definitely about this person in the front. She's smiling. She kind of looks tired. Notice what she's doing. This is an iron to press clothing. She's wearing a uniform which looks very clean and pressed, although her collar's a little messed up. But the idea is she is working. She's a laundress, someone who does laundry. This is most likely in the basement of a hotel or somewhere else where they're doing all these piles and piles of laundry. She has a very hard job, but despite that, she looks proud. She looks happy. She's letting us know that she's serious about her work. The photographer used leading lines to kind of lead your eye in with the cord of the iron. It leads you to the work that she's doing. Her hands are really important, as is her face. She needs her eyes and her hands to see to do her job. You could also say that this is a rule of thirds picture because there are vertical thirds and there are horizontal thirds where important parts of the image are taking place. Probably lit with artificial light. This is a portrait of Annie Leibovitz, and she is actually a famous photographer. She is known for her photos that are more for commercial subjects. She's done a lot of covers of like Rolling Stone magazine, Vanity Fair magazine. She shoots a lot of celebrity photos. And in the photography world, she's thought of as more of a commercial photographer and less as an artist. And so This is a portrait of her at one of her first exhibits of her photographs where they were taken seriously as art forms, not just commercial pieces. And so she's kind of sitting there. She has that look on her face like she's sort of pleased with herself. She's thinking a little bit. Notice the rule of thirds, you know, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and then horizontally as well, you've got rule of thirds. Definite asymmetrical balance where she's off to the side. We actually, the part of the show that's her exhibit of work is sort of blurry. So we don't really see her art, we see her, which is kind of interesting. It's a unique portrait. This one I think is interesting from point of view. So where are you, the photographer, standing when you shoot the photo, and how does that help the viewer see the image a certain way? In this instance, it's almost like we're in bed with this mom and daughter. I'm assuming that's who they are. And I'm not saying that in a weird, creepy way. It's like we're right there. We're with them. So it's a very intimate kind of a moment. It's like a private moment where we are being allowed to be in that moment. The point of view is showing how happy they are with each other, how cuddly they are together. The subject fills the frame. This is a great example of filling the frame. So you can see their heads almost go off the page. We're so zoomed in and so close to them. This one, I always like to show this image because a lot of students feel like this isn't a very good portrait. It's out of focus. It looks like the subject is moving. There's some kind of like this weird silvery reflection sort of interferes with the image. But the more you look at it, the more intriguing it becomes. And I think sometimes knowing when to break the rules, like having a photo be in focus, sometimes breaking that rule can be a good thing. This photo reminds me of what things look like when I have a migraine headache. I get migraines. I don't get them as often as I used to, but my vision definitely is affected when I get a migraine, and everything gets a little blurry and a little bit bright and kind of weird. That's what this sort of looks like. It definitely evokes a feeling. There's a feeling of nervousness, a feeling of maybe the person is upset or frustrated. Maybe they do have a headache. Notice how the lines of the blinds kind of lead you to the person. Her arm leads you up to her face, and you sort of can see her expression. So it starts to give you a feel of who is this person and what are they feeling, which I think is part of the point of portraiture. This next one is actually one of my own photographs, and this is a portrait of one of my former students. So I think it's a good example of being observant. So I was in this gallery on a field trip with my class, and I looked through a window and I saw my student, and she was in this little room in the gallery shooting photos of the artwork that was in front of her. And I just thought it was kind of cool because she was an AP art student and she was planning to go on to college for art. And in this portrait, she's surrounded by art. There's art behind her in the gallery, there's art in front of her, and there's even some reflections of paintings in the windows that I shot. And so I shot this photo in kind of warmer light, and I actually played up that warmth because this is a student I really liked. I enjoyed her. She was a nice person. And so I wanted to play up that warm feeling of who she was and the fact that she loved art. Kind of a rule of thirds going on. She's just a little off center, a little bit asymmetrical. um, I think that her face directs you to the subject, so you're not only seeing her, this isn't just a portrait of her, but you're also seeing it through her eyes as an artist. What is she looking at and what is she interested in? Sometimes cropping a photo can be a good thing. Now, I don't know if this gives us enough information about this person. It's just an eye. But this is also kind of the view we're seeing of each other right now because we're covering most of our face with a mask. So who is this person? What are they feeling? Um, sometimes cropping tightly and allowing your subject to go off the page, filling the frame so much that the subject is like overlapping the whole space can be a good thing. This is a portrait by Annie Leibovitz. Remember the person I showed you before? This is a portrait of Anthony Hopkins. He's an actor. You might recognize him from the movie Silence of the Lambs. And so I think this is an interesting portrait because we never actually get to see his real face. He's holding a Polaroid photograph up in front of his real face. And an actor, it's kind of what they do. Like they are constantly acting, and we never truly get to see who they really are as a person. It's always a role that they're playing that we see. So it's kind of interesting image, I think. Definite filling the frame. You could say there's a bit of leading lines because his hand kind of leads you to this photograph. Very strong portrait. This is a portrait of Andy Warhol. I'm sure you guys have heard of him, famous pop art artist. I think it's interesting because Andy Warhol was a really shy person. And so he is showing us his face, but he's closing his eyes. He's not quite letting us in. Also, notice how dark it is over here, how shadowed his face is. So, kind of an interesting view. His head is tilted, so you get this sort of asymmetrical balance because of the diagonal line of his face. His face is filling the frame. And notice how there's nothing in the background. All the clutter's been removed and it's just his face. So we're forced to confront him. His mouth is a little bit open. So is he going to tell us something? What is he about to say? What is he thinking about? All of those kinds of questions come to mind with this portrait. This is also Andy Warhol. This is a photo silkscreen. And again, playing around with that idea of hiding. He has literally put camouflage over his face so that we can't quite see the real Andy. He's been disguised with camouflage. This is A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez. He was a really well-known baseball player. He now, I believe, he's married to J-Lo, and he does baseball broadcasting. But this was shot at the time when he was one of the top hitters in Major League Baseball. And I think it's a great portrait because his eyes, his eyes are really sharp and clear and focused. And a good baseball hitter has to have really great eyesight. He looks calm, but he also looks a bit menacing. He seems confident, and he's holding on his shoulder here. It's out of focus a little, but that is his bat. So he's letting you know, I'm a hitter, and he's kind of staring at us, kind of confronting us, filling that frame with his gaze and with the portrait. So the rest of these photos are actually from photo shoots we've done in the classroom. The one on the left is me. The one on the right is a student. And so the idea is dramatic lighting. So when we do our portrait photo shoot, the one on the left, like I said, is me. I was actually not posing. So I just happened to be sitting there on the floor, being out of the way for the shot. And a student saw me and they thought that the light looked cool on me, so they shot a photo. And I think it's a pretty good portrait. If I were editing this, I'd get rid of this cord here. But I think the lighting is kind of nice. This one is really cool. So noticing those moments that might happen while you're observing to shoot photos. I apologize. I just got interrupted while I was recording this, so hopefully I finished my thoughts. I think that this lighting on this one, there's a little bit of clutter showing here in the background, and that's something that you'll need to deal with and figure out how much color do I leave, how much do I get rid of. Those are all decisions you'll be making. These are a couple more dramatically lit studio images. Again, do you let the light show in the background? Do you leave all the clutter or do you get rid of it? What stays, what goes. This student actually went into Photoshop and edited their photo quite a bit at kind of playing up that harsh lighting, and I thought it turned out really well. These are a couple that, this is back when the art room actually had windows a long time ago. And so these were naturally lit with that sort of available lighting coming in from the window. Really nice, beautiful lighting. Both of these are outside lighting, so natural lighting can be part of this unit. And both of them really portray the personality of the person in the photo. The one on the left, he's on his bike. The one on the right, this student, his name was Sam. He was always juggling. He was always kind of entertaining. And so I like how this image shows him in action. It also is interesting how he's kind of off the page. So the way that the picture's composed creates a sense of movement as well. This one I think is really neat because it's really barely a portrait. It's almost more about the scene, about the landscape, but then you do see the subject way off to the left side. And the student was really into, nature and kind of had that sort of boho hippie style to her clothing and everything. And I just really like this. I like how the train tracks lead your eye up to her. And then you continue on down the track into the natural world. So kind of cool. So your assignment is you're going to be shooting a series of at least 36 portraits demonstrating six of six examples of each of the lighting techniques. And you're going to have 6 examples of the varied composition techniques. You're going to be saving all of those into a Google Photoshoot folder. And then we're going to be learning about how to determine which are the best ones. You'll be learning about how to use the camera timers. There are timers on the camera, so you could choose to do self-portraits if you wanted in this unit. It's not required, but you could. So we're going to be learning a little bit more about Photoshop and how to use it in a different way than we did in our first unit. This is a huge part of this unit, so I really want to push that idea of developing a good concept. So this unit is about asking those questions. What are you trying to say about the subject? What mood does the image evoke? Who is that person? What's their personality? Why did you photograph them the way you did? The setting can enhance the story you want to tell about the person. You could choose to use props in your photos with your people. You could have them dress up and portray someone else. You're going to be watching that video of Cindy Sherman. And Cindy Sherman, none of her photos are really self-portraits, but yet she is actually the person in all of the portraits. So, who is the person you want to portray? Is it the real person? Is it a character? Think about that. How can you enhance the mood and the interpretation of your work so people see what you want them to see? Where will you photograph your subject? And why is that important? Okay. So eventually you're going to be finishing, you're going to edit 3 best portraits, and you'll have the opportunity to print 2 of them and mat 2 of them. And we'll get into that more later. Okay? Thanks so much for listening. Follow the rest of the directions embedded here on this assignment now.